On November 22nd, 1963, I was having lunch in the ornate chairman's dining room at NBC. I was a vice president of news, but we had taken over the dining room that day. Don Durgan, who was the head of the television network, or at that point chief sales operative, and Chet Huntley, who was then part of the Huntley-Brinkley report. We were meeting with executives of the Standard Brands company, an advertiser. Chet Huntley was a farmer, and he had a farm in New Jersey. And Chet Huntley and the executives of the Standard Brands were discussing how he could get corn husks from them and feed them to his cattle in New Jersey. When the butler came in with a silver tray and leaned over to me and whispered, "I've heard on WNEW, Kennedy has been shot." And I got up without excusing myself and went to the headquarters, BOC, Broadcast Operations Center of NBC. It was on the 5th floor, one floor down. And that's where everything took place when we had an emergency. It was a room about the size of a current sports utility vehicle, and you crowded at least 6 or 8 people into it, and separated by a glass partition. And Bill Ryan, William Ryan, a correspondent, a very good one, for NBC News, walked in about that time, and I said, "Go in and get on camera." And he said, "What'll I say?" And I had a UP flash in my hand that said, "Flash, President Kennedy has been, Dallas, President Kennedy has been shot." And he said, "What'll I say? I can't go on with that." And I said, "Read it forwards, and then read it backwards, and then read it halfway, and then read the other half, and by that time, you'll have more to say." And he went in. He did a really very good job, really very good job. And a young man in the front part of this Broadcast Operations Center turned around and said to me, rather petulantly, I think, "When are we going back to local programming?" And I said, "Son, why don't you go home? We're not ever going back to local programming." And while we didn't have a correspondent on the air from Dallas at that time, we followed the story from that moment on until the following Monday night after the Kennedy funeral, without ever leaving the air. And without commercials. There were many people afterward who asked me quite a number of times, "How long did it take you to decide not to do any commercials? How big was the fight about not doing commercials?" There was never even any discussion of it. Kentner just said, "We'll drop the commercials." And that's all there was to it. We never discussed it at all.